Hi there, good evening to you watching back at home, wherever you're watching. Thanks for joining us on Mountain Echoes this evening. This is DMR TV broadcasting from Buea in Cameroon. I am Jude Mbako, your usual host, and you know already that every evening when we sit on this platform, we touch on current issues that affect daily life in every aspect of life. And we bring analysts, we bring panelists who are worth the salt to touch on these issues. So tonight is going to be one of such evening, and we say happy weekend to all of you who are just joining us. Now, you can follow our discussion live on our social media platform, live on Facebook, as we are rolling on. We hope that you will be able to chip in your contribution when necessary. We would like to hear from you as well. We equally will have a number on your screen there. You can send us the message if you want, and we will be able to attend to your worries. So tonight is one of such evening where we'll be looking at issues affecting the people of the Northwest and the Southwest regions. Recall that since 2016, these areas have been very turbulent, and within the context of the crisis, not just in the Northwest and Southwest regions, other parts of Cameroon that we know, like the far north, there have been serious right abuses that go just beyond human imagination. And this has also prompted the creation of many rights organizations in Cameroon that advocate to ensure that the rights of women, children, and even you and I, men, are protected. So tonight, we are going to be looking at civilian protection, okay, and rights to security, specifically within the context of the Anglophone crisis in the Northwest and the Southwest regions. I have members of a rights movement who are here, and equally experts in law and gender issues, and they cut across other professions who are here tonight to talk on this issue. Let me quickly introduce my panel, beginning to my far left here, Dr. Barrister Mabel Noko. Doctor, you're welcome.
Thank you.
You are from the Movement for Democracy, Development and Transparency in Cameroon, MDDT.
You're very correct.
It is a rights organization here in Buea?
Yes, it's an NGO. It's based in Buea, and specifically we are located at the Express Exchange building at Moliko, Buea.
How old has that organization been?
We've been existing for about 23 years now, because it was created in 2001 by Honorable Akonte Andrew, who is the founder and creator of the organization, and it is currently being directed by the national director, who is Barrister Clifford Niba Akonte.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for honoring our invitation to be here today.
Thank you.
We equally have next to you Barrister Eno Peter Ita.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Very good.
You are a lawyer and managing partner of Pioneer Law Firm.
That's correct.
Here in Buea too.
That's correct.
Yes, so you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You want to tell us about Pioneer Law Firm? Where is that?
Well, Pioneer Law Firm is situated just directly opposite African Travel Agency.
Okay.
Yes, mile 17.
All right. Dr. Ken Pelagier.
Yes.
Right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Ken Pelagier is a lecturer. She is an educationist in the University of Buea.
Yes.
Law.
Yes, I'm
Lecturer
actually with
English
the with the Department of Public Law and Public Administration, specifically Public Law Department.
Which means that is where you do plenty of research in terms of the
Of course,
abuses.
teaching and research.
Yes, great.
Yes,
so we are
as well
honored to
as-
have you.
Thank you very
Now,
much.
last but not the least on the panel this evening is also a lawyer,
Yes.
Dr. Barrister Nimbo Martin.
Yes.
You are the associate
I'm an associate.
at
Yes.
Justice.
And Love Arena. That's the name of the law firm.
Okay. That one too is in Buea here.
No, it's at Bakwere Town, just above Executive Hotel entrance.
So you're welcome.
Thank you.
Right. So these are members of the panel with whom we are going to be talking this very sacrosanct issue this evening. I know that most of you are watching back at home. One way or the other, you must have heard, you must have been victims, or someone close to you must have been a victim of rights abuses within the context of this crisis. So let's first of all contextualize. We are talking about civilian protection, but like I earlier said, we want to understand why MDDT is championing this advocacy before we get into it in its entirety. Can you tell us why the need for the movement for democracy and democracy development and transparency in Cameroon at this moment to come back to this issue of civilian protection and right to security, because it's an issue that has been recurrent.
Yeah, that's
Other NGOs have been taking on it. So why is MDDT coming back to this?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. MDDT, as you mentioned earlier, just for the understanding of the audience, is Movement for Democracy, Development and Transparency in Cameroon. It's an NGO that has specifically focused on issues relating to civilian protection and right to security. And why is because it is in tandem with the mission and vision of the organization. The organization's purpose is to create a society. We look forward to having a society whereby social justice and development can be attained by maximizing the resources that we have around us. Sometimes we don't want to go far-fetched to look for those solutions. We just have them around. So we are the solutions to begin with. So we use what we have to attain those objectives. And equally, we know that there is a void that exists in the society as a result of the political or socio-economic frameworks that are in place. So it is our goal that we have a society where human rights is respected. We have a society where development can be attained social advancement or development, social justice so can be realized. So if we look at the topic critically, we'll see that it fits in tandem with MDDT's mission and vision. So that's why we have been on this project for a while, and this project we have actually had foreign partners and collaborators work with us, specifically OSAS, that's Open Society Africa, to see that the ongoing crisis, we as an instrument we have come in to mitigate the situation of things. As the program unfolds, we'll know more of what MDDT has done vis-a-vis civilian protection and the rights to security.
I was talking about going to as a right movement here in the southwest region. You must have encountered so many of such cases of civilian abuses. I recall too that the government has put in structures to fight this, but the government cannot do everything alone.
That's
and
true.
that is why structures like this are coming up.
You're very correct.
How, to your own opinion and to the work that you have been doing at MDDT, how can you assess the level of abuse that we've witnessed within the context of the crisis in this region?
Well, we cannot divorce ourselves of the fact, or our minds of the fact, that there has actually been human rights abuses. We don't need a soothsayer to tell us. We live it in the society. Some people have suffered both directly and indirectly. Could even be explained as a result of the displacement of people who have left those hot zones to move into other areas for security and for preservation of their rights. So human rights abuse or violation has actually occurred, and MDDT specifically, we have specifically targeted those hot zones, those hot areas. So we have focal points in Kwen, Bali, Manfe, yes, Moyoka, Kumba, yes, we go as far as that, because we don't limit it to what is going on. If you go to those areas, you will see that there is a need for intervention. So that's how those areas have actually been a point of focus.
You work with those focal points?
Yes, we have focal points in those areas, and we work with them.
Document, like you get the abuses, you document them.
We have all of those statistics, and we did not even begin our activities without having those focal points trained, so that they can actually understand what is expected and what we are diving into, so that the desired result, goal, or objectives are actually attained.
Right.
Yes, so those are some of a little of what we have done vis-a-vis civilian protection.
Barrister Nimbo, you are a human rights lawyer, I must say.
Yeah, well, if you would say that, I would love to refer to myself as a general practitioner.
All right. When you protect people's rights, do we also say you are a human rights lawyer?
No, yeah. I think I have an interest. I have an interest in human rights, and I equally have a background in human rights
Right.
and humanitarian law.
Great.
specifically.
So now, when we're talking about civilian protection, what
Yeah.
are we looking at? Who is the civilian now, and what is the context of civilian protection?
No, well, that's a very, very important question. You see, if you have to define who a civilian is, we have to situate a context. You have to define a civilian differently during peacetime from a civilian during a humanitarian crisis
Yes.
or armed conflict. Because the legal text which we legal minds often use in defining terms, we call it the Black's Law Dictionary, specifically the 10th edition. It defines a civilian restrictively with regards to the peacetime by simply defining a civilian as someone who does not serve in the military. But you discover that if we have to restrict ourselves to that definition of a civilian, it is going to be restrictive and it's not going to expound our particular purpose. So a more expansive definition of a civilian that encompasses civilian protection during humanitarian crisis and armed conflict would be a civilian as a person who is not a member of the armed forces, a civilian, a person who is not a member of the law enforcement agencies, and equally a person who is not actively or directly involved in armed hostilities or military operations. So that's an expansive definition of who a civilian is.
Is a government official a civilian within the context of a crisis as such?
No, the question is, are you a member of the armed forces?
So if you are not a member of the armed forces, you don't carry arms, you're a civilian.
You're a civilian, yes. Thank you.
Great. So in terms of their protection, before we even come to their protection, what would have, at what level do we think that civilians' rights should be protected? Because within the context of crisis as such, in the northwest and southwest regions, we had situations where they tell us that this person wasn't a civilian. It's difficult to dictate who a civilian. In terms of the arms you're talking about, someone carries arms and you still call the person a civilian. So where do we cut the line to be able to know whose right to be protected in this case?
No, that's why I said an expansive definition of a civilian. A person who is not a member of the armed forces or is not a member of the law enforcement agencies. But equally is someone who is not actively involved or directly involved in armed hostilities. Some of our laws which you have that govern armed conflicts, which we call it the humanitarian law, and it especially governed by the Geneva Conventions and its additional protocols. And they have been emphatic that immediately a civilian carries arms openly, he ceases to become a civilian and now becomes a combatant.
I think that is very important for us to establish who a civilian is, because
yes.
we should also know that combatants carry arms, and when it comes to protection, sometimes lawyers wash their hands off that we don't know this person is a combatant. And when you become combatant means you are able to face the music. Now, so what's the direction in the context as such? How do we protect, how do we advocate for their rights, for their protection?
Okay, for civilian protection.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. You see, international humanitarian law, specifically the Geneva Conventions, as I said, has already laid down principles and law that is geared towards protecting civilians. And some of these principles include principles like the principle of distinction. The principle of distinction, I think the International Court of Justice has held emphatically that is one of the most important principles with regard to civilian protection. It simply means that parties that are involved in armed conflict must make a distinction between who a civilian is and who is a combatant, and equally to direct their military operations or their attacks only towards the military objectives or the combatants and not civilians nor their properties. So that's the first rule. It simply means that when you're directing your attacks or your armed attacks, you should direct it clearly at military objectives or combatants and not civilians. So that's the first principle, that of distinction. You have other principles such as the principle of proportionality, which means once you are directing your attacks, you must, even if you're to attack a legitimate target, you must weigh whether the particular military advantage you seek to gain from that particular attack outweighs any casualty that might befall the civilians. So a target might actually be legal to attack, but it becomes illegal if the collateral damage of damage that might be caused to the civilians outweigh the particular military advantage you seek to achieve from the very attack. So that's the principle of proportionality. And then you equally have the principle of precaution, that you must, parties that are involved in armed conflicts or in humanitarian or situations of unrest must exercise restraint to ensure that their attacks do not have a boil-over effect of injuring civilians and civilian properties or civilian objects. That is why the Geneva Conventions and its additional protocols have equally said that when a combatant is unable to identify whether a person is a civilian or a combatant per se, they should treat the person as if the person were a civilian, just for issues of precaution.
Right.
Yeah, so those are some of the principles that have been put in place to protect civilians during armed conflicts.
You've been practicing here for a while now, I guess.
No, I was just recently sworn into the Cameroon bar.
Okay, let me ask someone who may have been. Barrister, have you been here for a while?
That's
in
right.
this region?
That's right.
Yes, and you watched and see how the rights are abused or they are respected depending on where you stand.
That's right.
Where is the limit? Where do we begin to advocate for people's rights to security? Let's talk about civilian protection, the right for civilians to be protected. But there's also the right to security. We don't know who should be. Is it just the civilian that needs protection? Do we have a point in time as well that security officers, they serve the state, right?
That's
Or other combatants who have for a legit purpose, for whatever mission, have a right to security? Who has that right to demand security, even at the level of the battlefield or behind bars or wherever?
Yeah. Queuing from what my colleague on the other side, Barrister Doug Gilman just mentioned, it is also, these are all reminding yourself that we're delving into international law principles, and they are quite unique in themselves, because most often they seek to protect the combatants and what you call civilians and all actors within that sphere. And so at some point, an extension of what he's trying to say, we will not just protect civilians. It has to do with protecting even the military themselves, that's soldiers. Those, for example, who give up in the course of the war and say, all right, for example, I want to give up my arms. They should be protected. International law in itself protects such persons and requires, that's why they are taken sometimes as prisoners of war. Yeah, and I think the government is taking steps within our context.
Yes.
And that's why you find around DDR
The
centers,
DDR centers,
where you
yeah.
have the boys sometimes come over and declare themselves,
And
unfit
drop
to
them.
continue in their process or whatever they call it.
Yes, and the government has also created the Human Rights Commission.
Human Rights Commission.
Which
These
has
are
been-
all institutions that are there preaching out, some of these principles. I must say it is quite fundamental. The issue of protection is quite fundamental to the human person. And so the Human Rights Commission, we hear several cases where through its units, you find their personnel going to the field, trying to talk to the military, trying to talk to people, educating them on some of these rights.
Has that been yielding fruit? I recall that when this crisis started in the early days, you people lawyers were the
Yeah.
first where your rights were
Very right.
were abused, you people were actually tortured.
It is very unique.
So as time goes by, have you been able to realize some progress, some change
Well-
in the way police handle civilians?
Sincerely, I must say there is an improvement. The war from the stretch, I would call it the war, because we've moved from riots to, we see full-scale war between the belligerents. So if you want to put ourselves fast forward to 2024, I think there is some degree of respect to the civilian and other, even lawyers will affirm to that. In the days before, like you just mentioned, when the riot started, you would find soldiers, malhandling or, at some point even torturing some of the lawyers themselves who went on public protest. But today, I tell you, even within the police units, there is some level of respect that has been accorded to some of these persons.
I guess you must have been visiting the prisons.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
So,
yes.
so what testimony do you have in terms of this crisis? How many people do we still have there whose rights are being abused by
Unfortunately,
security forces?
Unfortunately, the information flow from the prisons is still very, very alarming. You would hear several cases of most of their rights not still being respected, no doubt. I mean, even at some point, I remember the case where a senior colleague, was denied access to his client, Barrister Ewule, a human rights lawyer. Yes. And so these are some of the little things we still complain, that government must put effort to guarantee these protection and right. I mean, security and it's a far-stretched principle. Yes, it has to do with protecting the individual.
Right.
Just to add, Mr. Jones, to what Barrister said, when we talk also of security rights to civilians, it's not only limited to those individuals who are just, on the streets or not involved in any conflict or in any war, but also those who are giving assistance, like nurses and medical doctors and even journalists. So they also have the right
those institutions that must not be touched.
To protection. They are also, yes, their security is also is guaranteed. So the law also makes provisions for that. So
I mean, like the international humanitarian law has given some specific areas that are red zones for belligerents, and these are things that we must also be. Schools, media houses like this.
Media houses.
Yes.
We've had several cases of journalists being attacked. We've heard of schools being attacked. These are the things stakeholders like MDD is trying to fight.
All right, Dr. Pelagie, this is a fight that has gone beyond males, women. I mean, like, sometimes when we talk gender issues, I'm very particular because women like that, they are very emotional when it comes to gender issues. They are highly hit when it comes to crisis era. Yeah. Women are highly hit. Children too are very much touched. Some men like us can always run, but women, it's difficult sometimes for them to leave whatever they have. The children,
protection.
Yes, they need some special consideration.
Yes.
Within the context of this crisis, I reported extensively, and one of the first women who was killed was a policewoman in Bamenda. Was at the Bamenda Central Prison. Okay. Who was beheaded, and this somebody who we cannot say was a belligerent to the crisis at the time. Is a woman who was killed. Another one was killed in Muyoka. Yes, there was one lady who was beheaded. So many people have been killed. Many women have been targeted. For men, we can even consider that some of them had arms, but women have been targeted. The right of women within the context of a crisis as such. What can we make of that?
Well, it's actually a despicable situation. Getting to understand that women who are the vulnerable class and children, as well as youths, instead of being highly protected at a time like this, they are subject to such and are considered as victims to such heinous acts, by, I don't know, sometimes they are identified, sometimes unidentified. So it's a very difficult situation. So, but what we should know is that we have to keep on fighting, especially to protect the youths, to protect the women, because the women are the peacemakers. Because without them, we cannot have a very sound society. Without the women, we cannot, manage conflict. They are the ones, they are propagators. They take a lot of engagements. Ever since the crisis has started, we've had women-led groups and organizations coming together, joining their heads and seeing how to get into those highly hit zones, even to provide assistance to the fellow counterparts who have been hit by the crisis, some internally displaced, providing sanitary, psychosocial support at different levels. We've seen quite a lot done, initiatives taken by some organizations like SNOT, Southwest Northwest Women Task Force, CAWOPEM, Cameroon Women's Peace Movement. All of that are geared towards reach out. Even the women, the Ministry of Women Empowerment and the Family, they are carrying out initiatives, at different levels to empower the women, because the crisis has led to a lot of economic downturn. So it's alarming, and we have to get up. We cannot keep on lagging behind because of the crisis. We have to eat. People have to survive. They've provided all kind of means of sustenance, during this this crisis.
Somebody like Dr.
If I may add something to what Dr. Ken said, the current trend of events now, you observe that women are victims even to the extent of legal proceedings. What do I mean? You realize that during this crisis, there's what we have this term, they say bushwives. These separatist fighters who are in the bushes, they don't want to be seen or noticed, they stay there, they go into these local villages and communities and take up young girls and they marry them under the pretext that they are their wives. And when they say they do all these diabolic things, they just are afraid. They are afraid to speak out, they are afraid to make it known to society and all of that. And when the information now gets into the ears of the state or the government, the very common offense is now failure to report that you were cohabiting or in communication or relating with these people and you fail to come and report. What happens? How can that young girl solve that kind of controversy over her life? And before you know, she's down in prison custody or she's remanded there, no one to come, and because her family, maybe they are displaced somewhere, these people have taken her into the bush as a bushwife. Those are some of the things that young girls or women have faced as a result of this crisis that we cannot close our minds or our eyes to. And I think that it's equally a platform where we are calling on the government to look into those kind of cases with some sensitivity, because a young girl of that nature, what form of defense, what can she do in that situation? If she goes to report, she'll be killed. If you come and find her, you take her up for walking with the bed. It was never her intention to be part of that scenario, but it's a circumstance. Maybe she remained there because she could not move, and because you cannot move, you are now becoming slaves or assistants to them. So these are situations that we are still living in it.
You've been getting reports from the field, from your focal points.
Exactly.
And these are adoption of girls. This is a common practice in Nigeria. Even.
And now even the rate of rape, sexual harassment, abuse, IDPs, they are in Douala. You go there, you say you live with an uncle who comes in the night and wants to violate the girls, and all because of this crisis. So you see that women, just to add to what Dr. Ken said, women have actually suffered. Let me be a bit emotional because it concerns gender and women a bit, but these are practical realities. Young girls, women, we have to wake up to see how to redress some of these issues.
And
it has eaten deep.
So, but should it be just the government intervening? Sometimes you have to speak to the consciences of these boys.
Yes,
I don't know whether they even have consciences, but sometimes it's important.
Anyway, I was particularly talking on the government when it concerns those women who are currently in custody and they have issues of that sort. Maybe we want to involve some different legal procedures or tactics to see how to manage those sensitive cases as such. Maybe we want to. But generally, we all know that we all have responsibility to ensure the protection and security of ourselves as well as that of our neighbors. So if that young girl is living in your house, you that uncle, you that relative, you should not violate her. Protect her because they are there for security. If they are in your community, let's put our hands together to make it a better place. That's what I think, for peace sake.
So I was just to say that besides even the physical violations, we've also had a psychological trauma which the women are going through. It has led all the conflicts, they've led to, how do you call it, violence, aggression, even by spouses. The effect is eminent, you see. So we really need to work hard and get out of this this quagmire.
Many of them here, all of you are on the field every day, but you are also of the academic milieu, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'm also attached to. Yes, I'm a volunteer with MDDT Cameroon as well.
But which means that most often you deal with academians. At the moment when things like this are happening, how do you people in the academic milieu, what are people busy doing? They are gathering information on the field. What are you doing at the level of University of Buea, your faculty? How do you engage the actions on the field, advocacy?
Well, we a couple of times we have seminars. We engage in research, wherein we liaise with human rights partners, to educate the youth, coming up with like policies that are all embracing caution, and that involve prevention, because sometimes the roots, when we have conflicts that is not managed at a minimal level, that is when it gets to explode. So how we can manage, have conflict resolution mechanisms, especially. Even we have a department that is in charge of that. We have courses on conflict resolution and persons taking that, and help to see how we can address conflict situations, engage in negotiations, inter dialogue, negotiations, mediation, and other alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, because that is the way forward. We cannot solve the issues at stake or conflicts by going to war. We will never have any resolve. Aggression, it's not yielding. So the only way is for us to engage into dialogues with stakeholders, other stakeholders, partner with other universities, and also I call on the students, especially the youths, to not engage in atrocities or any activities that would endanger them. The way they dress, the way they go, they get along, they get around. They should dress responsibly. They look smart and stay focused, because we are in trying times. So they must be very diligent in going about their activities.
Right, but in cases like this, most often people will blame. People often want to exonerate the civilians. You people don't have, you people need protection, you people need it, but it's also a society where we have to tell people sometimes the truth about their own responsibilities in terms of actions. Even the population, we have seen communities that shield evildoers. I want to be very categorical here. To the detriment of the rights of others. You're talking about girls. We've seen communities too, that really help that these acts are perpetrated in their communities. What's the level of their responsibility towards ensuring that things like this are mitigated?
Exactly, and you see some have to do, you've already mentioned a number of issues related to that, because fear has taken the order of the day, I think. In the context in which we operate, you realize that for many years, in this context of the war, most of these stakeholders, like the NGOs, in their course of carrying on the activities, will realize that most of the victims themselves find it difficult to express such concerns. I mean, in what they have suffered.
The fear
so
factor.
You go about in fear factor. Exactly, from both sides, the non-state actors and even the military. I mean, I remember sometime we passed through my fear in Manu, around in Mojok, and I met a young lady I used to know that was pregnant and very young. And mind you, all I could hear was that, Uncle, it was a military man who raped me. Very alarming. And in that family, they had no one to present such a situation. They are even scared of talking. Who believes them? And so I think one of the things, because we're talking protection, civilian protection.
And this is a reality.
I reminded us that it's a very fundamental right. The Cameroon government has ratified a number of treaties internationally, and even its constitution is carrying this fundamental right. So people must learn to speak up. On our part, as advocates, we do quite a lot. At my level, at the Pioneer Law, we have created what we call Pioneer Literacy Foundation. And so we do lots of such discussions too at the level of communities. But I think we need to step it up. It's a very alarming issue. And most of these cases occur in the hinterlands.
Yes,
like you rightly
that's
said.
what I was thinking.
Exactly.
Most of these advocacies are done at the level of, fortunately for MGZT,
they have those
you have focal. Yes. Most of the advocacies are done in the urban areas where it's easy to access these areas. Security is better. But in those hinterlands where illiteracy is high, ignorance is even terrible, it becomes difficult for these rights to be respected. What do you usually tell your focal points down there? How do they maneuver these issues to bring information to you?
Well, I must say that I don't want to say it's surprising, because it is expected that you know that we don't remain at the urban areas. Often, sometimes when we carry out these activities, we go into the field. We go into the field so that we have first-hand informations. Except when we see that it's really challenging, then we allow the focal points, manage the activities. But we are always present or have a representative of the organization present. It always go a long way to create the effects, because the people know that we are not just those people who sit in their offices and talk and then they don't feel the steam or the presence there. But basically, even after the activities, we always have a follow-up mechanism. So that's why we use the focal points for reports, for updates and all of that back to the organization, so that we can be able to measure what we have done and what we are expected to do more. And basically, for us to attain some of these objectives, when we go into the grassroots levels, we use the people concerned and we use the culture of the people. That's why,
to them,
exactly, so that we can be able to achieve the objectives and the goal we want. We use the traditional leaders, we use the cultural dance group in that community, we use the local people, and usually the focal point is someone who is from there, who can communicate rightly, so that the solutions and the recommendations we bring can actually penetrate and go through. In that way, we achieve faster and greater results.
So you've been intervening in situations?
Yes, we have. We have had a couple of cases, and we have had a couple of testimonies from people who have actually experienced or been victims of the crisis directly. And even the national director himself, Mr. Akonte, I would say that he has had his own fair share of this, because he has experienced. He was kidnapped at some point in time. So what we say and what we preach is not out of the blues. These are livable experiences. Yes, very livable and practical experiences.
Yes.
So that's why we can be able to squarely see into the issues and see what to do rightly.
All right. But Martin, you want to ask something? But
Yeah.
just also say that in those communities you're talking about, when you talk about civilian protection, those civilians there, sometimes the same people who are to protect their right, they are either abusing or they have lost trust in the community to go there and protect the right. In such cases, how do we battle this out?
No, well, that looks like a simple question, but it's not really that simple. But before answering that question, I will take us back to a very, very, very important part when we spoke of the conduct of the civilians themselves, that the civilians must be mindful of their conduct. As much as I want to uphold that school of thought, which is true, because as the old adage goes, prevention is better than cure. They cannot secure your rights in the grave. But the conduct of civilians is not an excuse for their human rights violations. I think even international tribunals, such as the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, has held that parties to a conflict or to a humanitarian crisis cannot violate the rights of the civilians by way of a reprisal. Reprisal simply means more of like a revenge in ordinary parlance, like an illegal act in response to an illegal act or to an unlawful action. So it is not really an excuse. Parties are called upon at all times to exact themselves with utmost diligence to the law and with utmost respect to the law, irrespective of the conduct of those civilians. But we are still calling on the civilians to, as doctor said, to behave themselves. They should carry themselves the way they dressed, the way they appear, and the rest, to prevent themselves being victims of this system or of these abuses. Because should they find themselves in a precarious position, well, the rights might not avail them then.
At that point, you lost.
Just to add to what Barrister Martin said, in that regard, what NDT specifically did is we worked on a toolkit.
A toolkit.
A toolkit. We call it toolkit because we expected that the youth to use it as a tool to protect themselves or to take the necessary precautions and meet the current atmosphere. those toolkits we produced, we distributed to schools where we have youth, we distributed to other environments or places where we have youths. And the target of that toolkit was to ensure that the youths have the right information how to live in the current state of affairs in the country, because it is important. In that toolkit, we clearly stated on how to use your phone, because we know there was a time when it was very rampant, where when a youth is just met along the streets, the military or the force of law and other will just tell you, show us your phone. Before they know, they just start going into it. And we had a lot of stories we can say, but that sometimes they search and they put in things which ought not to be there. And also we know that it was very rampant at one time, where in Moliko, when this hit and run thing was very common, where they would just go into the quarters like Dirty South and just arbitrarily arrest a whole lot of students and all of that. So that is why we produced these toolkits, to help educate and sensitize the youths on how to live in the current crisis zone, how you should dress, how you should carry yourself, your comportment, like Doc said, be presentable and all of that, have your ID cards, because the issue of non-possession of ID cards became very alarming. And they did not know that even leaving your room to your bathroom behind the house, you need to be in possession of it. So I think MDDT saw it as a responsibility that we equally needed to sensitize even in the urban areas to reduce some of these offenses and high risk things. So that is what we did. We have the toolkit, we shared, we produced, we shared, and I think it has helped so many youths who want to believe that these are the positive actions that we have done that has helped to mitigate a lot of these ills that have reduced nowadays.
Doctor, you were talking about women. And I recall vividly that in the early days of the crisis, I think 2018, 17 or 18, we had this snort you just called. They had a day of lamentation.
Yes.
Lamentation. They designed a day in Bamenda. They went to the grandstand there with different groups. Women lamented, they cried, they came here.
Sitting on the ground.
Yes,
I think I saw a video of that on social media.
They have all kind of traditional methods of,
And each time the government talks to these women, especially ministers like Minister Tagan, we all know he often emphasized that you people are the mothers of these boys who perpetrate this act. According to government, most, in fact, women are yet to really actively talk to their children. Governor Kola Bila is here. Every time he talks, you people should talk to your children. Are women actively really playing their role to talk to these children?
Now, so thank you for that question. I'll just it's a very important one, because the issue is that when we are, all this just starts from the family. Where when the children are born, okay, they are groomed from a home. It starts from the home. And what are the women doing to assist the children? What is the effort? Is the nurturing? Is it enough? So we are looking at all those things, because if the love, the care, and the discipline that these children need is provided in the family, which is a basic unit of every society, then we are winning. But we see that a lot of us women nowadays, so much commitments, there's no time. As the husband is out, the woman is also, we are all women empowered, educated and all of that. And we do not have ample time to discipline these children. So it all starts from the home. We have to educate, because the discipline starts from home. We have to educate our children, discipline them as need be, avoid discrimination, favoritism, because that's where all of this violence and aggression starts, and they are minimized and they are not tackled, and women are also, they are good at negotiation and conflict resolution. It starts from the home. So if we are able to succeed at that level, then we will have the effects of aggression and violence is going to be minimized when eventually children grow up and they become adults. So that is where. So
they
and
who provides. They also have the impression that they have been involved in the peace-seeking process of this crisis. Have women really? Do you have the impression that they have really been involved?
Yes, of course. It is not even something to ask, because They have used even traditional, they have gone to all lengths, even to traditional methods of peaceful resolution. They have used even takumbe women, where the women get into nudity, you know, to shame the heinous or the terrible atrocities that are being caused by state or non-state actors, because we don't even know who commits what at what level, you know. So it is...
I have a question for Dr. Ken.
Yes.
I want to find out from her that, what about those youths or those children who they come from the best homes, they have all the guidance, the direct, the protection, they are very strict homes. Some families will even tell you 7 p.m. you should be home and all of that, but when they come to the university here, they are not a reflection of where they came from. And because of that, you have peer influence that changes them. They become something else and all of that. Because I don't know. I want to just ask Dr. Ken that question.
Say that
how do we manage those kind of situations?
The foundation is education. That is the best thing every mother or every parent, because even though we say you keep questioning on women, take note that it's not only women that have to, you know, whose civilian protection rights and security should be protected. The men as well have their own role to support these women socially, financially, and psychologically. They should not abandon. You have a lot of women struggling on their own, and that's why they don't even succeed with, you know, disciplining and educating the children as much as they would. It's true that you may have wayward children at some point, you know, when they come out and then they get... But once you give them that education, they won't be able to distinguish between what is good from what is bad. And even if, you know, they are convinced by friends, they will sit, when they sit on their own, they will reflect and say, no, but this is not what I should do. I've had an education, I've had a training from my home, even education at the level of at the churches, because it's not only the parents that provide. Besides schools, yes, we also have religious groups, institutions, okay, and they all play a role to building the youth and a cohesive and a responsible society.
Right. So, Barrister, you know, with all this, at the end of the day, we truly get to understand that as the crisis exacerbated, we got to also realize that many right groups like MDDT came up. We have many of them.
Many of them.
Yes, that came up to fight this, to assist government in fighting this. At one point, I remember that Médecins Sans Frontières was highly touched by the government.
In the Northwest.
And yes, and it was closed. Yes, that's the reality. Some of these NGOs suffer for the work they do.
Exactly.
At what point should you do what as an advocacy group? Are they what's the difference actually? Advocacy, activism, do they take side? Are they impartial when they take? Because they say sometimes if you are not taking sides, then you are not protecting the rights of, yes. Should they be taking sides? Where should these right groups really stand?
I think it's a very careful one, because usually when these right groups engage the field, they are always faced with the realities on the ground. And at no point should they be limited, especially with reporting as it is seen on the field. We are at crossroads where you find advocacy groups or such right groups delving into truths, and at the same time we realize that the government in its own policies are a little more they get to restrain such truths. It brings us into that sort of, you know, difficulty, and that's what's on the ground. I remember, like you rightly said, when Médecins Sans Frontières was hardly hit. I mean, at some point we are talking liberty rights too. Do not restrain the advocates or the advocacy groups at any point in time from reporting what they see. That is the truth about, you know, handling the conflicts that we presently find. So protecting in itself has to go with truth. So I want to think that government's policy must be a little more encompassing, preserving and holding on to international standards that require us to, you know, present the case as it is to the world.
All right. Let's just have a breather. Kindness Jogo, my producer. Let's have a breather so that we can equally usher in a political analyst to give us a political touch in this edition of Mountain Echoes. So you're welcome back to Mountain Echoes. Like we already hinted that we are bringing in somebody who can give us a political touch. You're a political analyst, Mr. Gabriel Iyagaka. I hope I got it right. Iyagaka.
Yes, you're right.
Yes, you're welcome to Mountain Echoes.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Yes, a political analyst. We also want to understand within the context of the crisis, what was the political stance you have as a person, and what political solution can we have to this crisis? We know how much NGOs have been working on government, but there should be a political solution too. Truly, the crisis is fading out. We don't know how it's fading out, even though we've heard that in Manu Division these days. It's not been easy.
It's not been easy.
Yes, in Akwaya and other places. But is there a political solution? You, as a politician, as a political analyst, have you been taking out time to also look at it from that perspective?
Yes, on the concept of civilian protection and the right to security, looking at the political angle of the problem, I can say it's a very difficult equation to solve. And so, before we want to look at the political dimension, it will be much interested, if you permit, for me to try to do make a comment on what the other panelists have said, the cardinal observations which they've made. And we heard in the jargons that have been employed here words like non-combatant, words like civilian, but there's something that is missing somewhere. So we didn't hear words like illegal combatants, which is also found in the Geneva Conventions.
Illegal combatant.
Yes. And before I go there, I would like to say that if you look at the lexical definition of the word a civilian, it's anybody who is not taking part in the hostilities. But when you go now to the word non-combatant, they talk about people who are not taking part directly in the hostilities. Because there are some people who are taking part indirectly in the hostilities. People like the medical personnel, people like the peace crusaders, and even the political analysts, those who are mentioning and working on the problem, they are taking part indirectly in the hostilities, so they are non-combatants. And when you look at the right to security found in Article 9 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, you will see that it protects non-combatants to some extent, not at large. Unlike the way it protects civilians at large. So all civilians are non-combatants, but not all non-combatants are civilians.
Yes.
That is one thing that we must first of all take into consideration. But now if you go a bit into the Geneva Convention of 1949, and you look at Article 3, you see that it does not explicitly describe the word illegal combatant. But I mean, it does not say it as a phrase, but it describes it trying to talk about persons whom they think are not legal, they're not considered combatants legally, because they did what we call violation of the laws of war. And in that case, this Article 3 of this convention protects only at a minimum those kind of persons. In fact, if you look at it, the Geneva Conventions in general, you will say, for example, that it may be antagonistic to Article 45 of our Constitution. which will want that international treaties override national laws subject to reciprocity.
Sure.
But in this case, the Geneva Convention is telling you, I'm not protecting you people. I am only coming in between conflicts between two sovereign states. I'm not at the level of civil war. I'm not at the level of civil conflicts or the problems that are happening internally. I can only protect you people at the minimum. Article 3 states it. Human and non-discriminatory protection simply, internationally. So if you look at this, it tells us that the political solution of this equation is a bit far-fetched. But what do we do in the meantime? That is why the topic makes sense now. I'm talking about enhancing civilian protection. And this enhancing doesn't come from lambasting or castigating or pinpointing the belligerent parties. No. It comes from us surviving, from us being able to adapt in the new normal, in the new ecosystem. And that is why I would like to point out again that one of the loopholes of law, which we should not forget, and I would like to tell our people so that they are going to join us in this salutary initiative to become active partisans of civilian protection, is that the law is more of being punitive than preventive. At this juncture, what are you going to do if you're a victim of arbitrary detention, of the right to security not being respected, and all those things? Why not prevent? Why not resort to the adage, prevention is better than cure? So at this juncture, equally, I'm trying to tell everybody and all of us that we are all partisans of the process of enhancing civilian protection and the rights to security. And the first step is, first of all, by educating ourselves more on these laws that have been put in place and on the legal frameworks governing them. Because it is not because you are ignorant of the law that you are not going to be a victim of it. As the legal maxim puts it, ignorantia juris non excusat. You're not excused. So you need to first of all learn the law. That is the first part of it. And then secondly, you need now to become a civilian, which one that you should not be a non-combatant and you should not also be an illegal combatant. One of them is, when you talk about spies, for example, those who go around giving information to the military, who do they think they are? They cannot be protected. In fact, their protection is dwindling. And at this level would allow you for the politicians to come in to solve the problem. So maybe while we are trying to find a variable in the equation, we will employ and invite everybody to play the Pontius Pilate for now, one, and then equally apply what MDDT has written in their toolkits, in their documents to send out. I want to applaud them as crusaders of peace who have sold their bets. That is just the first comment I can give to this topic since before.
All right, so we don't have too much time to accredit this evening. We are going soon, but now, Barrister, in cases like this, how do civilians maneuver the harsh insecurity that we have already? Because I must attest that I've been a victim too. Personally, I remember I hosted one program here and people have been a victim to this kind of civilian torture. But how do we, in case you are faced with this, what are the immediate things you should be able to do?
Well, the immediate things is to report to the authorities in question, because the institution with the first primary responsibility of protecting the civilians is the state and the government. The state and the government. They do this by holding violators accountable. So if you're a victim of any of the security rights breaches, be it the right to privacy, let's not say the right to life because you must have died. If you have any other relative or someone whose life has been taken unjustly, the best you can either write a report to the various legal departments, which is an extension. We always say the legal department is an extension of the executive arm of the government. You can write it to the various, even to the various law enforcement agencies. Or if you do not have that direct, you can even, most of the civil society organizations like MDDT and the rest, if you contact these organizations, they will know what are the necessary courses of action to take. Because they are equally parties that are responsible for the protection of civilians.
Right.
Yes.
But just to, one last thing from you, if you've witnessed the whole scenario, and now if you were to make some reforms, some advocacy, some strategic areas you want to make advocacy towards this protection of civilians and right to security, what would that be?
Yeah, just queuing it from what he said. We would all have to put in mind that the state is the first protector of these rights, and so I would call it, see it, report it, just like citizens must do. These violations, we must learn to report them. I know at some point civilians themselves lack the trust with these such state institutions. I must tell you, the penal code is very, very clear on such protection of these rights. At the level of assault, at the level of rape, at all levels, our penal code protects civilians. And we at the side of the bar are very ready. Human rights lawyers are very, very available for people to make such reports. I mean, it starts with such reports, and I want to applaud most of the advocacy platforms, like even the NGOs themselves and LGBT, what they're doing presently. Those are the steps we must take, and I would want to shun and tell the youth to avoid one area of such, because when we were talking earlier, reminding ourselves, we put the responsibility of the civilians themselves. And if you find in our society today, I want to say it's one of the effects of the war, drug abuse. Drugs is on the height. And so I will be cautioning youths, to avoid any such trend. I mean, drugs is illegal, and so you fall into the hands of the gendarmes, the police, they will rough handle you on that ground. So let's avoid or stay off.
Okay. Any last word from Dr. Mabe? Dr. MDDT is carrying out this advocacy in the Northwest and the Southwest region. Was there any plan for it? What's up? You talked about 2 kits that they are doing. What's the mode of operation? Do you go out every day to use loudspeakers to announce to people that this is what we are doing? What's your mode?
To say that what we do, it's more than using loudspeakers, because it's not all about the noise and all of that. It's actually creating the impact and the effects. And currently we have a manual that we are currently distributing on strategic advocacy on civilian protection and the rights to security, and that manual encompasses in detail what we are actually talking about, the various stakeholders responsible with protection and with ensuring the rights to security that is respected, what is civilian protection, who a civilian is, what the degree of responsibility. That manual contains every detail that we will need, or we should have information we should have regarding this topic. So
can someone whose rights have been violated get to you people, and how can that
definitely, if your rights have been violated and you seeking for where to go to, we are open and ready to receive you. I think I already made known our location before.
Let's do it again.
And then we are actually located at the Express Exchange building at Moliko. And we are present on the various social media platforms. We have Twitter, we have YouTube. You can find us even on our website. If you need any information or further details on us, you can go there and see the lots of activities that we are carrying out and we have carried out, and would enjoin even the population to join us in this cry for peace. That together, let's advocate for peace and let's see how peace can take the order of day.
Right. Mr. Gabriel, one last thing. You are not assuming that you are not a professional now. You are just a leader, and you have to solve this problem urgently in the Northwest and Southwest region. What will you be applying?
You mean which of the problem that
the insecurity problem and the crisis as a whole? What will you do immediately?
Well, I may not have the necessary tools, the necessary tools right now, but I think that it is not one person who is going to solve the problem.
So what's your recommendation?
So the first recommendation concerning the crisis is that we should all admit that we are all already tired of what has been happening so far, and so we should develop some enthusiasm in wanting to see its end. And then the second thing is that we can only successfully do it by an understanding of the major cause of the problem, and equally participating either by being an activist in the solution of the problem, if you can, or by abstaining from making it worse from the way it is right now. The other aspects are a little bit very technical that it may be too much for me to expatiate right now. So we hope that with time the state and the other stakeholders are going to try to make this to come to an end. But at the moment, what is of prime importance is how to survive amidst the odds. Right. And that is what I hope we have been able to discuss so far.
Mr. Yanga Gabriel, political analyst. You are here in Buea, right?
I'm based here in Buea.
Yes, we'll have time again to have you expatiate on those issues.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you as well to you, Barrister Nimbo Martin.
Yeah, thank you.
We hope to see you again.
No.
And to Barrister Eno Peter.
Thank you very much.
The managing partner of
Panya Law Firm.
Okay, I'll come for some issues so that you handle it.
I'll be back.
Dr. Mrs. Barrister Mabel, thank you very much. And for the work MDDT is doing,
Yes.
we commend your efforts.
Thank you. And the public should be aware that MDDT has safe spaces.
Okay.
Yes, we have safe spaces, and we've created civic hubs even in schools. And we are currently carrying out activities in so many areas. And join us while we do our sports events, cultural events, to see how together we can promote peace.
And that one can help you psychologically
Exactly.
flush out the crisis.
Exactly.
Well, we've come to the end of Mountain Echoes this evening. Remember that Monday is National Day.
Yes.
And all of us are patriotic, praying that the country should be one as it is, that all stakeholders should come on board and do what is necessary so that we should be able to stay together. I want to also recall that I've always been advocating for you people to go and vote, register. By the 31st of August this year, registration will close at the level of Eleka. So if you want changes in this country at every level, please register and vote, or leave the people out there to continue doing the good job they have been doing. I've been Jude Mbako. Thank you. Take the rendezvous for Monday when we'll have another edition of Mountain Echoes. Good night.